could still taste the shame, like iron in my mouth. Every time I thought back to that afternoon, the memory grew sharper, not duller. The mat of old carpet beneath my feet, the chilly hush of expectation, and sunlight piercing across the jury table. I'd walked into that marble-floored municipal hall with my head stubbornly high, clutching a short documentary rough cut in my hand like it was a shield. That panel, Mrs. Mthembu from local television, tall in her fluffy coat, Mr. Van Houten, city arts officer, glasses sliding down his nose, and Ms. Mapaseka, stone-faced critic, purse against her chest, barely glanced up as I plugged in my battered flash disc. I stood at the front, barely breathing, as the video scratched to life. Overexposed shots of market vendors, my own unsteady narration. I'd poured 12 sleepless nights into it, sacrificed celebrations and the World Cup fan parks, just to shape those 5 awkward minutes. And as scenes played, they shifted in their seats, exchanged a glance. Halfway through, the audio skipped. "Sorry, I stammered, clumsily starting it again. Miss Mapaseka coughed lightly and flicked her wrist. "Time's up." My voice vanished. After, their remarks clanged in my ears. "You have an interesting perspective, Lungelo, but this is not quite the standard we look for." Van Houten added, "A bit amateurish. Maybe a more practical career would suit you." Mthembu smiled thinly, clearly ready for lunch. In a single breath, my hope turned to dust. Back out in the corridor, I caught my own reflection in the glass. Tall, anxious, clutching a battered backpack. The final blow came at home. My cousins, squat around the lounge table, burst into laughter when I recounted the committee's verdict. My aunt snapped, "Does your fancy filming put food on the table? We all dream, boy, but we know when to wake up." I shrugged, but deep down, the words carved wounds. My mother's silence cut the sharpest. She just shook her head, face unreadable. Johannesburg in those years didn't make things easy. The city was a restless, jostling thing, always on the brink of something new, but deeply suspicious of uncertainty. My township, a patchwork of rusting gates and tiled roofs under the stifling gold of summer sun, was filled with people who guarded their dreams quietly or traded them for overtime shifts. My documentary ambitions became the family's running joke. Every time I borrowed my uncle's camera, someone would mutter, "Spielberg better watch his back." Around neighbors, I grew used to rolled eyes. My best friend Sizwe drifted from teasing to worry. "Ah, Lungelo," he'd say, "I've sent 20 CVs just to work at the bank. Why mess around with films? There isn't money for that here." Somehow that didn't break me. Maybe I was stubborn or just foolish. With each dismissal, a slow heat built in my chest, not the quick rage of anger, but the banked coals of patience. I quit the hardware shop, found piecemeal gigs, editing wedding videos, shooting birthday parties for uncles and their mates, even doing some tedious explainer videos for a cousin's scarred-up that never started. Long after everyone went to bed, I'd slip on headphones and lose myself in the hum of the old laptop. I watched the light on faces, learned sound and rhythm from cheap online tutorials. A few small competitions yielded nothing but polite rejections, repeatedly told, "Nothing personal, just not the right time." The phrase began to taste bitter, but I kept moving. The turning point was chance, the smallest kind. Sizwe's aunt worked cleaning in Santon, in a house where an international TV producer had rented an apartment. The woman, Mrs. Smith, left behind of all things, a business card and a handwritten note in one of her film books. The book's cover eye-catchingly read, "It had lain forgotten under a coffee table." Sizwe's aunt, knowing my interest, pressed it into my hand as a joke. "Maybe you'll learn something, filmmaker. Maybe God is sending you a sign." I read it in a week notes in the margins, the phone number circled bold. Then I waited 2 days and, after rehearsing a speech in front of my bathroom mirror, called. Mrs. Smith's voice was accented, clipped, but not unkind. She listened. "Young filmmakers always want to show me something," she said. "Are you ready to be told the truth?" "Yes," I replied, though my stomach twisted. That night, I barely slept, flipping between hope and dread. She agreed to meet for coffee. I spent my last 60 rand on minibus taxis, sweating through my one decent shirt. She sat at a corner table, smartly dressed, phone always half in hand. I remember the glint in her eye when she asked, "What would you film if money didn't matter?" That question unlocked something fierce in me. I told her about my block, my mother's recipe book, about the disappearance of the old corner shop, the street artists, the music, about wanting to document the textures that everyone else rushed past. She listened, lips tight. Then she said, "Come work part-time for me. Observe. Don't talk, shoot, cut, listen. I'll pay what I can." I biked to Rosebank every afternoon that summer. I learned more in those sticky, tepid months than in 4 years of borrowed books and YouTube. I ran errands, but I also watched great footage in slow motion. How light filtered through windows, how people's eyes told more story than words. Mrs. Smith was sharp, critical, but never cruel. She watched my progress and sometimes would say, "Better, but you missed the real moment. Try again. Wait for the moment." When she returned to Manchester, she left me a tripod, I note, and 10 names, contacts who could spare a little work. "Don't come back thanking me," her note ended. "It's your burden to carry and your gift to share." I pressed forward. Documentary grants were scarce. Days slipped into months of hustle. I'd learned to wait. Wait for the right shot, the hum in the room, the untouched silence. I started to develop my own projects, shorts about the taxi queue marshals before sunrise, the worn pensioners in Wilgehowell who played dominoes nightly, the small congregation in an empty warehouse church. Some entries were ignored. A few clips went viral on township social media, nameless, faceless, stirring up conversation. 3 years later, an NGO working with homeless youth saw a piece I'd done on street dancers downtown. They offered a grant, modest, but enough to buy a better camera, pay 2 high schoolers as runners, keep the lights on for half a year. I spent 6 months shadowing kids under highway bridges, at soup lines, at sunset. The final cut was not pretty, but it was real. It hit harder than I'd anticipated. Local news picked it up. A small European film festival invited it to screen. For the first time, people emailed asking if I could teach workshops, guest at events. My mother saw my name on a poster. Her face a strange mix of pride and disbelief. But the biggest shift was in me. I walked with my head up again, no longer apologizing for my persistence. The rejections of before didn't sting as badly. The weeks leading up brought anxiety like a drumbeat. I stayed in an Airbnb close to my block, the streets humming with the growth of new shops and sharper corners. Friends I'd lost to bigger cities returned in my phone chat groups, all curious suddenly. Everyone claimed they'd always known I'd do something big. On the evening of my return, the sky over Johannesburg glowed, dusky, electric, promising rain but not delivering. That marble-floored hall, now less intimidating, held a small crowd, the same faces from my youth, grayed and softened but still alert. Mrs. Mpembu, now a TV producer herself, Mr. Van Houten, older and balder, Ms. Mapasika, wearing the same severe lipstick. My uncle sat at the back, one dramatic hand on his broad knee, eyes slightly narrowed. My mother beside him, hands clasped in anxious prayer. There was no flash disc this time. They'd set up a projector, my short film cued. A girl in her teens tried to steady her voice at the podium before me, her nerves shaking, her speech rushed. I remembered how my heart thundered against my ribs all those years back. I smiled, and when introduced, took the stage with a camera slung casually at my side. I looked straight at the jury before starting. I spoke honestly about shame, ridicule, and the years of scraping through. I told them about Mrs. Smith's lesson, wait for the moment, and what it taught me about patience, about allowing things to show themselves rather than forcing them. I could almost hear my uncle's skeptical sigh, feel my aunt's impatience. Then I dimmed the lights and hit play. The film splashed across the screen, a full 30 minutes of Johannesburg's undercurrent, dancers flipping through dusk, a grandmother braiding hair on her stoop, faces under neon. My narration, steady, confident, liberal with praise and pain. In one scene, a boy described his first dance competition, voice cracked with nerves. In another, an old grocery store owner explained why he kept his shop open through riots and rolling blackouts. The room shifted. At first restless, then still, laughter in the right moments, sharp inhales at the unexpected. Miss Mapasiga pressed a tissue to her eye. My uncle straightened, not looking at my